And we are live, Adam.
All right. Welcome into the live podcast, Silver Linings Podcast. I'm Adam. Next to me is Rex, and we have a special guest again. We've never done this before, to have a live guest on with us when we do a live. But because of what Ben said and brought to the table in our last podcast, Rex and I felt like, look, let's let him come on. There's so many people that made comments about questions and things that Ben had taught us about, healing and PTSD and all kinds of things. So Ben, Benny Fufu, welcome back. We missed you, my friend.
Thank you. I'm super excited to give some value to people. I know there's been a lot of questions, and I want to talk about the things that you need to be able to move forward and keep going. So I'm excited.
And I love that there was a comment that mentioned because of our family situation. Rex and I have, been pretty much in the front of media and stuff with our family situation. And there's been so many great comments of like, oh my gosh, Ben was amazing. Your family is great. Rex and I haven't heard our family's great in a long time. So Ben, you're
never
a shining light to try to, make our family look a little bit better. So that was great to have you on. And thanks for coming on again with us today.
Yeah, I'm glad I fooled everyone and made our family look good. That's important.
Yeah.
And before we get to that, we have some special announcements about merch. If Kimberly will turn her camera on. There she is.
Yeah, Kimberly.
Hi, Optimist. I don't have any jokes today. People keep asking about jokes.
Yay.
Yay, no jokes. I'll be as quick as I can. I know everyone's excited to get to hear all about what Ben has to say. We have moved the merch store from Etsy to Spreadshop. And don't worry, I'm going to share the link in the chat. But we did this because we had a two-step process before. We had a vendor and we had Etsy. And the problem with that was Etsy was sort of the middleman. And we found that also impacted prices. So we really wanted to make sure that we had the same type of merch, the same quality, if not better, and a more accessible way for people to automatically link to it. So we've opened a new merch store. We're very excited. It's going to launch immediately. As soon as I post the link, you all can visit it. Don't worry if you have anything in Etsy. We won't shut that store down until everything's processed. But what's exciting is that we have used all the information of products you've already purchased, designs that you like, to make sure that we could include those in our new store. And then we have so many more new options too. So I want to also announce that because we have our grand opening for merch, the next 10 days will be 15% off. There's a promo code on the site. You'll see it. But don't worry, there's promos all the time on Spreadshop. And for the entire month of April, we do have some special Silver Linings gear. It is stylized for Autism Awareness Month. We want to donate the proceeds from those sales to organizations that support autism education, awareness, and advocacy. And we're very excited. It's called the #4JJ collection. So April 1st are there 30 days in April, guys? Or 31?
Yes, 30.
Whatever. However many days
I should know. It's my birthday month,
right,
and I have
Adam.
no idea.
Help me out here. So the whole month of April, all of those products will be available, and the donations will be done at the end of the month. So those are the quick updates. I know everyone wants to get back to what originally planned show.
Just to be clear, if we buy an item for $10 at the merch store, we're going to get $1.50 off, is what you're saying.
If
Just
that's
doing the math,
because I don't do math, Adam.
Just making sure we're on the same page.
But also, we love your feedback. So if you have feedback about the new merch store, please don't be shy. Give it to us. We can only improve with feedback. So I'll put the link in the chat, probably multiple times, and I will turn it back over to you guys. Hopefully I did that in like 3 minutes or less.
Yes, great job. And thanks for doing the merch store. People really love the things that they're buying from there. Hats and hoodies and t-shirts.
Women's medium shirts, Adam.
Yeah. I still have it. I haven't put it. I can't get it on, but hopefully the new store I won't get a women's medium shirt when I order the men's
and
large.
then send it to somebody.
Yeah,
that's what you should do with it. But all right, guys, I'm going to disappear now. I'll be in the comments if you have questions. Adios.
Thank you, Kimberly.
And Adam, I didn't talk with you about this before, but in the month of April, if anyone donates to the podcast, either during a live or after a live, why don't we donate that to the same cause that the merch store is?
Love it. I do. Yeah, that's great.
So if anyone donates here with that little dollar sign that Adam and I don't have, so we don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
But if you donate here, it will go to that same autism cause.
We can't even like our own stuff.
Yeah,
There's no like page like for a like button for us to hit.
we'll have to go back and listen otherwise.
Yeah.
So let's get to our subject now. Not getting to Ben yet, but just to tell you, we have other related subjects coming up, and we won't deal in that. But all of you know, Adam and I have been trying to run. We feel the community's been ahead of us, and we're trying to catch up, figure out what's going on, what the community can do, what we can do in providing this platform. And we think with Ben's visit, it was so eye-opening for us. We think that's what we can do. We think we can become, through this podcast and this community, we can become a doorway for people with trauma, and parenthetically, who doesn't have trauma, people for trauma to get the help they need. And we'll probably start with the emphasis on combat-related PTSD, but as Ben said last time, trauma is trauma. And so we are behind the scenes looking for ways we can do that. And we feel really good about this community becoming a doorway, as it has been to some degree, a doorway for people getting help. But we want to be more active, get more resources, do more specific podcasts like this one, and like Ben coming on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we'll have our publisher, Jane, and related to this subject with some exciting announcements for our community. The following Tuesday, we'll have Dr. Denham Slade returning, talking about dealing with trauma, especially inside of couples, talking about attachment styles and how that relates to trauma, especially in relationships. After that, we've asked Ben to return with his wife, Alice, and talk about both sides of their, I'll say,
living with Ben. Let's just be honest. She's going to talk about how in the world did she live with Ben? That's what she's
There's definitely trauma there. Yeah,
I just need trauma.
We don't want to get that personal, Adam, and we're going to have our ex-wives on there, and that just would not be pretty. So,
yeah.
At least Ben has a current wife to talk about it.
True.
I would love to touch on that. So we were chatting, and one of the things that was very powerful for Alice and I while I was traveling through PTSD, there's a guy named Chris Kyle. He wrote the book, The American Sniper. It's a movie as well. This was a guy that was part of the Joint Special Operations Task Force when we were over there. And so I have missions where he was Overwatch, I was search and rescue. There's things that overlap there. So I'm reading this guy's book, and there's a really important piece of this where they included letters from his wife and information that she discussed. And it was very powerful for Alice and I. And so when we talked about me writing a book, we talked about her writing a book that was paralleling those timeframes so people could understand the perspective of someone who is adjacent to or a loved one of someone who's traveling through PTSD, major depressive disorder, and all these things. Because it's one thing to have the perspective of a therapist or someone who's going through PTSD, but there's a whole group of people that are within their support circle and trying to help them through these things. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And there's just not a lot out there. The VA doesn't support wives and families necessarily of veterans. And we don't have a lot of counseling that's specialization in how do you handle PTSD from the adjacent or from the loved one who's trying to support them. And if it's okay with you guys, can I introduce Alice to the optimists?
Please do.
Yeah.
All right. So she's hanging out, waiting to get online.
Hey guys. Super excited to be here. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
So
there's
good.
Alice, man. It's been a long time. I told Ben that too. It's great seeing you.
It has been a while. Just excited to be here. Love being a part of this. Excited to one point, and whenever you guys are ready, to come on and share my experience of living with this guy and helping support him and everything that we went through, and just kind of my experience of being there and helping him through it. And not perfect and probably do everything right, but definitely here to support and share my experience.
Well, thank you actually for keeping Ben, through all this stuff. I mean, that's huge. Apparently what he's been through and stuff. So you guys together been through. I'm very curious to see the book correlation between what Ben writes and what you write, and the timelines and how that functioned. Because I did see the movie with the American Sniper, and I thought it's like when one person's in the military and they're overseas battling, and one of the scenes in that movie, he's talking to his wife on the phone, and a truck in front of him gets blown up, and he tries to get off the phone with her and not let her know that anything's wrong. So I'm sure there's so many different things that I'd be interested to find out how that actually works and correlates.
So much there.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I was just yesterday reading through I saved all of our emails that we wrote to each other. And I was just reading through a couple of them yesterday, and they're very eye-opening, even bringing back all those memories. So
yeah,
a lot of good information there.
Great. Well, we can't wait to have you on the podcast in a couple of weeks and go over some stuff. So, man, thanks for doing that with us, Alice.
Perfect. And thanks for everything that you guys are doing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And be prepared, Alice, when you read the comments, they're starting already, welcoming you, saying hi.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
That's great. She loves that.
It is. And not only has that started, but people have started donating already. Let me see. I see two of them here. I want to get them up. From Catherine. Thank you so much, Catherine. A $4.99 super sticker. We appreciate that. Cami, a $50 super sticker. So that's just wonderful for the cause we're donating for the Autism Foundation that the merch store is also donating for. So we certainly want to recognize that also. So Good Heavens is just a great community, and I'm behind on the questions already. So let me put this up by Kathy though, because this is she said she wrote this before I even talked about the lineup of speakers. She's paying attention last podcast, looking forward to the new lineup of speakers and getting beyond the Lori and Chad tragedy. Good for us too, meaning the whole community, getting beyond true crime. Now, we are going to, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but Adam and I have been doing a lot of interviews in the last week or two as Chad's trial is coming up. And there are a lot of people that want to hear from family members, etc. We aren't going to ignore the trial here. We will be commenting on it, especially during the lives. We don't know yet how we'll balance this emphasis we have and talking about the trial, but we will. We're working on all of it. We're so excited about this new emphasis, but we recognize also people want to hear about the trial on here as it goes, and so maybe we'll do more podcasts. Maybe we don't know yet. We haven't come to terms with that, but please just trust us that we are talking about it, and we will pay appropriate attention to each one. We just don't know what appropriate attention is yet.
Now, I saw a comment just popped up and it said, Adam, good job of interview on Court TV. Now, Rex had said something to me and I was stunned. He was like, that was the best interview we've ever done. And then Rex was on standby, ready to be on the interview, and they never went to him. And I was like, where's Rex? Why are they keep asking me questions? And Rex was actually in the back of his rental car with light coming through. Rex actually went outside and put a jacket in the window so the light wouldn't be shining on him while he was in the rental car.
The sun came up right when it was time to go on TV. The sun came up and just washed out
just
the car.
that whole thing was just like,
That
oh,
actually wasn't the reason I was on. The interview was going so well. The interview before that ran over, so the time they allotted for me and Adam wasn't as much. And the interview with Adam was going so well, they just said, "Well, let's just go with that." So,
did you go on an interview with them yesterday at 5 or something? Or were you
yes,
traveling?
I did with Core
Okay, good.
TV with Vinny at
Yeah.
5.
Good.
Yeah, but the one you did, Adam, I think was I truly do think was one of our best, and the message you gave there.
Well, I like to give Optimist shout outs on any time I get on any TV show, because the Optimists have really changed me and Rex a lot.
Yes.
Spiritually, mentally, physically, everything. So yeah, I want to give full props to the Optimists.
We appreciate it. Let's get back to Ben here. First question for Ben from Linda Lou. Ben, is there any way to do like a crash course of EMDR with you? How long do you think it would take to get some good results if I hung out in Texas for a bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to talk about a couple different things here. I probably average 12 sessions with someone before they're ready to start moving on and spacing out sessions and take life on by themselves and all of that. Sometimes it clicks really quickly. And in the first processing session, your brain changes and there are all these powerful things that you can experience. And sometimes we have to get through some barriers and travel through a few things to get into that protected space that your brain is working so hard to not let overwhelm you. So sometimes it does take longer. There's a really important process. I used to do these 90-minute intensive sessions, which can really do a lot of good and work really well. And so sometimes one of those is enough. Sometimes 3 of those is enough. And in Texas, I'm 100% online. So you can go to any place in Texas and hang out and get with me online. And I'm hesitant to say, hey, go do that. I don't want to put that burden on anyone that you need to travel to Texas and spend time there and do these intensive sessions with me. I'm completely willing to do that, but I would never ask anyone to do that.
Unless you're dying for Tex-Mex, because Tex-Mex is amazing in Texas. That food is out of control good.
As is barbecue.
And the barbecue,
there's some great food out here. So Google the restaurants and then stay close to them and then do therapy on the side.
There you go.
Is probably what you should do. But there's so many resources. I really would highly recommend reading the book Getting Past Your Past by Francine Shapiro. She's the author of EMDR. This is a very good way to understand EMDR. You could probably do 1 or 2 sessions with me, maybe up to 4, and be able to read that book and probably do it yourself. There are extenuating circumstances. If you dissociate, if you have some barriers, if there's some things that we need to get through, it could take longer. And there's no way for me to really know until we're in the middle of processing. And so I can't really guarantee those things and tell you that the average is going to work on the better side for you. So that's why I hesitate to say, come and do it. Come to Texas and work with me. But if it's something that you feel is really important, I'm all in. There are EMDR specialists all over the United States. You can go on Psychology Today and you can look at who takes my insurance, who does EMDR, who specializes in trauma, and it will come up with a list of therapists in your area that you can work with. And it's all certifications and licensures and insurance driven. So it is very much state specific. I can treat people in Texas. Insurance will cover Texas residents for my therapy. All the other stuff is self-pay. All of that is really highly regulated.
And let me just share, if I can get it on Amazon. I can. Here's the book, Getting Past Your Past on Amazon, Francine Shapiro. Okay, is that correct, Ben? That's one you're talking about?
Yes, and that's right. And it even says on there, self-help techniques from EMDR. You guys can do this. And I'm really excited to teach you a couple of things today that I think are going to be beneficial for you, that will help you in using this stuff for yourself, that I really want to get into today. So if you came on the live, then it's going to be awesome to learn a couple of these techniques.
Okay, before you do that, Ben, answer this one because inquiring minds want to know, are you and Megan related?
Do I have to answer that?
Yeah,
Or as the lady in
Yes.
court TV called her, Megan.
yeah.
Yeah.
If they're both
Well,
related to me and Adam, chances are Ben and Megan are related.
Yeah.
yeah, I think my parents spelled the name wrong in the beginning anyway. I mean, I think it's spelled Megan. I've had this all my life thinking my parents just spelled the name wrong. It should be Meegan, shouldn't it? If it's
I think
Megan,
so.
right?
Megan.
So yes, this is my older sister by 3 years. We did grow up in the same house together. We are brother and sister. I know she wrote a book. I haven't read the book. I love Megan. I love my siblings. I love her kids. We're all very connected with the nieces and nephews, and my boys are friends with them and do things because we're living in and around San Antonio till recently when a couple of her kids have moved away. But all of that is connected. And I'll say too that when you're raised in a family, you see things from two different perspectives. You have your perspective and the other person has theirs. And so she has a different perspective of relationships with Adam's family and relationships in our own family. So I would just say that, yes, we're brother and sister. We are very different. It doesn't mean we think the same or do the same. And everything that she's doing is for her, and I support that. And she's going through her own journey with some of the things that we struggled through. There are some things that we both struggled through in different places in our lives as kids that led to trauma and all of that. But we had very separate lives in that space. And I think everyone who's endured trauma in a family environment could understand that you are kind of in your own survival mode there. And so we have a very different idea of what happened in our lives in those time frames. And I just think that's important to point out.
And good heavens, you are both so incredibly well spoken. You and Megan both. That was very well said. Very well said, Ben. And that Ben answered another question one of you had. Whereabouts in Texas is he? In the San Antonio area. So Ben, let's go with Tori Meyer's question here. What is your advice to anyone with PTSD?
That's a great question. My first advice is something that I did say earlier on the other podcast: connect. Please find a way to connect with the people that you care about. I believe strongly and have seen it. And for me, it's true. You just saw my wife, Alice, on here. Connection is the antidote to PTSD. The first thing we do is isolate to protect people, but we're really protecting ourselves. And so if you have PTSD, if you're supporting someone who has PTSD, please connect with them. Find a way to make that bridge where it's a connected relationship in any way possible. There are some ideas that go on in your head when you're struggling through this, that it feels like danger to connect with someone because that leaves you vulnerable for pain. And the one thing that you're trying to avoid is pain because you felt so much of it. And it's really incredibly healing to be connected to someone. So that's a very important part of this. And so finding help is super important. Connecting with someone that you care about is, I would say, step number one for anybody struggling with stress, post-traumatic stress.
Thank you for that. Melanie S. asked you, and this is a chance for you to maybe share some more about EMDR. Does EMDR help with stored trauma, releasing it from your lymphatic system, or is it more cognitive in nature, or both?
That's awesome. I love this one. Trauma is both, a little bit of both, right? So we have a cognitive component. We also have a physical component. There's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk called Body Keeps the Score. It's about how we store trauma. And there's this great quote that I'll completely butcher, but I love Bruce Lee. I used to watch like Friday
The
night kung
karate
fu
Bruce
movies
Lee?
when I was a
Yeah.
kid. Yeah, absolutely. And he has such a great understanding of language, and he uses English, I think, as like his third language, and he speaks so poetically in it that I love it. He said something like, I'm just going to butcher it, but you can Google it. Don't say anything negative about yourself out loud because it casts a spell. That's why they call it spelling. Words have power. Your body collects the things that you experience. So yes, your lymphatic system. Some people hold trauma in their traps or in their jaw, or they clench their fists and their forearms get tight. There is a mind and body component to this that has a lot of power. That's why there are things like somatic therapy, tapping, dual attention stimulus, and bilateral stimulation are very important parts of EMDR because it's connecting the mind and body together. There's definitely a cognitive component. There's information trapped in the limbic system that needs to come into adaptive information processing. So these are both, and they're very important to do together. And a lot of times when I'm processing with people in EMDR, we do this thing called a body scan. And when I talk about the body scan, I'll ask them to pretend that there's a light passing over you slowly from your head to your toes. And as that light is passing over to you or passing over your body, it's revealing anything that is going on with tension or stress or good feelings. And people will find things like, oh, I feel much lighter, or I feel really tense in my shoulders, or I have this tightness in my chest. And it helps us understand where they're holding their trauma. And it's a very important part of the healing process to relieve that for your body. There's a white paper by this guy named Dr. Freud that's called Operator Syndrome. It's about special operations guys who've been under an extreme amount of stress for a long period of time. There's a lot of cortisol released when you're constantly in the red or hyper alert. PTSD mimics this. For operators, for special operations guys, it's about survival in the environment they're in combat and constantly training and all of these things so that they can stay alive and affect a positive outcome. For anyone who's experienced trauma, staying in the red is hypervigilance. I'm trying to protect myself. I'm on guard in case someone hurts me in an emotional way or a physical way, and they act the same. That increase of cortisol over a long period of time does damage to your kidneys and to your heart, and there are all these physical effects. So these things are very closely related, and it is a combined healing component when you can get free of it.
So Ben, wait, my mind is blowing here. So did you draw a correlation? If not, would you, with the people who are in the red, like people in special ops groups, and people just who are, would it be people with high anxiety that are also in the red, protecting themselves from trauma?
Constantly on guard. Yes, absolutely.
So just like the people who are in the special ops groups, those people are getting the same effect in their body. And could you explain how they're going to experience that once more? That was just wonderful insight there.
Yeah, so there's a lot to do with the chemicals in your body. We release these chemicals on purpose to have certain actions take place. When your amygdala shakes because you're anxious, it's dropping hormones to increase your heart rate and your blood pressure and shut down your metabolism so you can feed all your resources into taking care of this. That's why you get an upset stomach. So when you're nervous, right, these things are all coordinated, and the body and the mind are driving each other together. And that's one of the reasons why EMDR is so powerful, because you're using the body and the mind to activate and then process information. And if you're constantly bombarded with protection, whether you're hypervigilant because you're a former military guy or a former policeman, and you've just been taught to always be alert and aware and read people and understand your situation so that you can protect others or create a positive outcome, that's the same if you're constantly overthinking and you're driving in your car and you're worried about getting into an accident. And instead of being in the present, you're constantly stressed about the future. It's the exact same for your body and your brain, despite the stimulus and the details.
Okay.
So my therapy and the things I've been through are the same for someone who's never been to war and someone who's been to war.
So everyone that's listening, whether it's live or you're listening later to the recording, think right now of the people you know that are highly anxious. Remember a few weeks ago when someone asked me if I had any advice for anxiety? And I said, no, I don't have any advice for anything other than follow your conscience. That's all the advice I give. Well, that may have helped. And that person responded. And I'm, thinking in my mind that it was so generous that they had responded of how much that advice helped them, because I really think your conscience is going to help you find the help you need. But to me, that was a Band-Aid. Well, here is the advice that can really help. But I want everyone to think, how many people do you know, if not just yourself, that have a lot of anxiety in their life? I'm thinking of 3 people in the house that I'm in right now with that characteristic. And there are so many more people in our lives we know that have high anxiety. And what Ben is saying here is just foundationally so insightful for them.
Can we talk about kind of weapon number 1 to counter that? And then can I tie something into what you're talking about with anxiety?
Yes.
Well, okay, if
you have to, go ahead.
Okay, let's start with weapon number 1. Your battle against anxious thoughts, ruminating, triggered body response, your physical flood of emotion is heart rate. And that means breathing. So I've learned a lot of different ways to breathe, right? We do this rebreather when you scuba dive and there's no bubbles, you're actually breathing your own air that you've breathed out, and you can't overbreathe your regulator. So you have to control your breath. There's breathing for shooting from a stable platform. I can't be huffing and puffing and my sights are going up and down and I can't hit the target, right? There's breathing for running. There's breathing for swimming. This is breathing to lower your heart rate. There's meditative breathing, yoga breathing, all these things. Breathing is ice for physical medicine. You get a bruise or something that you need to bring down the swelling, and you use ice to do that. It's very underrated and very powerful. As combat medics, we have this joke that we always just talk about water and Motrin. Like, just drink water and take Motrin and you'll be better, because they're the basics. Okay, this is the basic, and I'm telling you, it's incredibly powerful. You need to breathe in a rhythm that is comfortable for you, and I'll explain all of this. I use a 4-2-4-2 cadence, meaning I'm breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 2, out for 4, holding it for 2. It makes this rectangle. I actually have little kids trace it while they're doing the breathing exercise, because they're bad at focusing on counting their breath because it's boring. And that's exactly what you want. You want it to be monotonous and boring inside your own head. It should sound like in 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, hold 2,000, out 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. I'm not going to finish because I'm already falling asleep. That's exactly the way it should feel. Okay. If you breathe in through your nose, it's a smaller volume of air. You're telling your brain, I don't need to gulp in air. If I just went up the stairs and I'm also doing work of breathing. I'm taking in as much oxygen as I can in order to fuel muscle contraction of my intercostals and my trapezoids. I'm doing work of breathing, and it's self-perpetuating. If instead I breathe with my diaphragm, or what they call belly breathing, and all this is quiet, and my belly is going out and in as I breathe, it means my diaphragm's pushing everything down in my chest cavity. It's creating negative pressure, and I'm breathing through pressure exchange instead of work. And I'm telling my brain and my body, I'm taking in a small amount of oxygen. I'm not using it for muscle contraction. We can slow this process down. The last part of it is counting. Counting has no emotion attached to it, unless you're counting money going out of your bank account to an X or something like that, right? Then there's emotion attached. But if I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a benign exercise. I can do that very automatically without stress. If my brain is focused on counting and my body is breathing, my heart rate will come down. My cognitive window will go from here, which is survival, to here, which is critical thinking and problem solving and all of those things. And I can think through a process and use my brain to create my behavior instead of reacting to my physical flooded response to emotion. So your first weapon is breathing. And that's the way that I use breathing for EMDR. I use it when I'm driving, when someone cuts me off. I use it when the referees make a bad
Rex
call.
uses his fingers, so just that's good for him to learn that.
Finger's a good substitute.
for breathing.
So that's
Go on, Ben.
weapon number one. But breathe in a cadence that's comfortable for you. Don't hold your breath too long, because then you reach your VO2 max and you have to expire air and it pushes it and you get anxious because your body and brain are saying, hey, breathe out, breathe out. Breathe in the cadence that's comfortable for you, that's benign. Count your breaths and use your diaphragm to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. That's how you lower your heart rate. That's the first weapon against anxiety, trauma, flooded, triggered response to things that happen in front of you on a daily basis.
Love
The
it.
second part of this that I want to touch on is identity and value. When you know who you are and what's most important to you, you make choices that connect those two things, life tends to take on a different tone, and it's easier for you to travel through difficult things. When stuff is piling up on you, and this goes back to Rex, what you're talking about with conscience, if your conscience and your identity and values are connected, when you make these choices, you feel better about it and you get less anxiety about what the future has for you. Anxiety is about living in the future. Depression is about living in the past, and both are imaginary. They only exist in your brain. The only thing that is tangible and actual is the present. So if you can stay in the present and deter yourself from worrying about the future or the past, you'll have less feelings of anxiety and depression. And those are byproducts and also perpetuating feelings of traumatic stress.
There's a couple things that you mentioned that I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. I wrote down some notes. So a while ago, you were talking about don't talk negative about yourself. And I wasn't going to bring up pickleball, but this is a good example. So there's, people who play pickleball, when they hit the ball into the net or they hit it out, they go crazy and they call themselves names. You idiot. What did you? And they talk to themselves about really negative things. And I was talking to a guru about that. And the guru said, look, when you are negative like that, it's going to continue as you play pickleball or whatever sport you're doing or whatever you're doing. If you're mad at yourself or upset at yourself or call yourself bad names, you continually to go down and down and down and you don't come out of it. The people who say, okay, well, I'm just forget that one. All right, let's focus on the next point. Let's be more, open about stuff and not really tear yourself down. You'll see that they play better. And so when you mentioned that in my mind, that's what came to mind was, anybody who, gets down on themselves and talks bad about themselves and calling themselves names and stuff, it's just a bad path to go down instead of forgiving yourself and moving forward and be like, okay, let's try this one. So I really like that. The other thing, when you talked about breathing, I follow this guru, Gary Breck, and he talks about breathing, and he does this obnoxious breathing in the morning. And the more oxygen that you get into your body, the better. Oxygen heals a lot of things, the more oxygen you can get in. So his breathing technique, if people want to really learn a really good breathing technique, Gary Breck's his name, and it's amazing. And it may take you, if you do it for 7 days straight, you'll never stop doing it. And so breathing and oxygen and all those things, I love healing. And this podcast is about healing, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever it is. So I love when you bring things up that resonate with me, and I'm like, oh, well, that makes complete sense because this is what I know about that. So thanks for bringing both of those things up.
Yeah, well, let me connect to your pickleball story because this is super important. In performance psychology, sports psychology, we would say when you do something perfect, like Adam, if you hit a serve and it was exactly how you wanted it to go, and it was the thing that you read, you calculated in your brain, and then your body completed it, you want to make that connection between brain and body. How often do we connect to something negative and reinforce it and sit in it and feel it and say, oh man, I was so stupid, or the things that you're talking, I'm such an idiot, these things, and we sit there and cycle in it and we feel it, and it creates a chain. This is a thought chain that can become like a heavy Navy boat anchor chain. It goes trigger, creates a thought creates a feeling creates behavior. that thought chain happens this quickly. So you hit a bad ball and you go, I'm such an idiot. And then you get into this behavior that is cyclical and also reinforced over time. If you've been a kid that has been told constantly to be quiet, or you're stupid, or you're fat, or any of these things, you've created a thought chain that goes all the way through that gets reinforced over time. How often do you create the thought chain in the positive? How often do you go, that was perfect, and then drop your paddle and tap that in? This very slow dual attention stimulus, breathing in, closing my eyes. That was a perfect serve. This is exactly what I want to reproduce. I want my brain and body to do that. It feels great. How often do we do that? In either sports or in life, we don't spend any time reinforcing that positive chain, but
Right.
we need that. And this is called resourcing. This is another technique that we use. You find a time in your life that is true, that's a memory, that you did something that makes you feel important, special, smart, the counter to your I am not. If my counter to my I am not is I'm capable, or I'm loved, or I'm good enough, or I have value, I'm going to find a moment in my life that I felt that way. And I'm going to breathe it in and tap it in. You can do it with your toes. You can do it with your heels. I like to do collarbones because there's a vibration there. And I breathe in and I reinforce that thought chain from what happened to I'm capable or I have value. And the more that you do that, you reinforce that chain. And instead of it being weak and deflected easily, it has the same power as that negative chain does. We just don't spend time doing it, but we're very self-critical and we use comparison a lot to beat ourselves up and use evidence to say that we're bad. And the opposite is necessary, especially for someone who's had trauma, who has a negative core belief that they're fighting that comes in when they get triggered. And these guys you're talking about on the pickleball court, or girls that are beating themselves up and they play worse, is a mind-body connection that's been reinforced over time. And they don't have the opposite.
That's great. It's good stuff. Love it. Oh, we got people donating money. We said earlier that if you donate money the month of April, we're donating that to Autism Foundation, right, Rex?
That's right. And Debbie D donated a super sticker of $4.99. Thank you, Debbie D. And let's
And Becky just did $5. Thanks, Becky.
very good. Yep, I missed that. Sorry.
That's
Thank
right.
you very much. Easter blessings to y'all from Texas. We all love Texas and our Texas connection. And all of Becky is one of our optimists. So that's just a good sticker right there. Back to Jewel Gazer's sticker question. How to approach cognitive therapy when emotions are not rational or feel too emotional as a person?
Yeah, this is a good one. So there's this thing I call therapy by thesaurus. There are all these acronyms: CBT, DBT, ACT, REBT, all these cognitive therapies. And they're all very good. And they make sense in an analytical way or a pragmatic way. And that's great when you can use 100% of your brain. The problem is when you get triggered, an emotion floods you and you have a physical reaction to your emotion, all the cognitive stuff goes right out the window. You can't do critical thinking and problem solving in your processes that you've learned in CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy or ACT or any of these, because the flood of emotion has narrowed your cognitive window to survival only. And your brain and body are only working to get out of it. They're not working to solve the problem. They're working to escape, run, fight, freeze until you're let go of it and you can run away. So it's really important that you counter the physical response so that your cognitive window can open and you can think through the process and choose your actions based on your values, as opposed to a reaction to your physical flood. So cognitive therapy is awesome when you're past the trauma, or when you can get past the trauma in the moment. And so if you breathe down your heart rate, we have this saying in couples therapy that you can't hear if your heart rate's over 100. So if you're spun up and you're flooded, you can't hear your partner, they can't hear you, you're in defense mode. nothing is getting through because your brain is not working in that way. And this is the same. You've got to breathe your heart rate down. You've got to get to a place where you can do problem solving and critical thinking so that you can use those tools. And it's really not easy. It's really a difficult thing to do. It takes training, it takes practice. So you've got to do these coping skills before you go to bed at night. When you wake up in the morning, you've got to create these pathways that I talked about with these thought chains that go in a positive direction to your I am. That's true for you. I'm capable, I'm loved, I'm important, I have value. These types of things have to be in there and practiced and trained so that in the moment that you get flooded, they can be used.
So as a side note, Ben, given your background, did you learn these thoughts, techniques, practices first as they relate to combat? I know you're applying them now to healing from what happened in combat, but are these the same? You mentioned your last podcast about it's serving you well to be able to detach emotionally when you're in a combat situation. Are you using some of these same practices to do that?
No, and I think this is really important too. The same tools that I use to be productive and effective in combat are not the same tools that I use to be in a loving, connected relationship at home and travel through life's difficulties. They're very different. Combat is about compartmentalization, and the military is really good at something called operant conditioning. And you condition yourself to put this stuff away and act. And you train in these environments, in these high stress environments, and you learn to use your brain outside of emotion. And Alice will talk about this too, I'm sure. There's this disconnect from connecting to emotion that helps you do your job. And that's not valuable in what we're talking about. It's valuable over there because I can't be worried about somebody or their family when I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do downrange. That is not something that can come into my mind. So I can't process that. I can't work with it. I can't even address it or give it any kind of value in my head. I have to compartmentalize and push past. And that's the exact thing that exacerbates PTSD because I've packed all these suitcases when they've come up and thrown them in the closet because that's what I learned to do to affect positive outcome in combat. But I don't forget them. And they're still there. And one day when I pack a suitcase to throw it in the closet, I open the door and they all come falling out on top of me. And now they're all over the floor. And I'm walking around tripping over these things that haven't been processed or unpacked. And I don't know what to do with them because what I learned was put them away. I didn't learn travel through them, unpack them, put the socks where they go, hang up the shirts, make it organized in my brain so that I can get what I need from it. And I can go get the sock when I want it. No, this is bombard me with these things, trip over at any moment that I don't know. And then I'm confused. I don't understand what my body's reacting to. I don't know I got triggered. I haven't made that connection because I'm just working with all of these things that I never addressed, I never processed, I never thought through. And so it's very different.
So insightful here. So maybe a follow on to that or related to that. Sherry says, so this helps with depression too, or just PTSD?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, sometimes I have a bone to pick with mental health and the idea of insurance and dictating care and all of those things. You'll be diagnosed by a mental health professional after you talk to them for 40 minutes, and you'll do an intake and you'll fill out these questionnaires and all of these things, and then you'll be diagnosed because insurance requires a diagnosis to pay for your treatment. A lot of times, depression is misdiagnosed. It's really a byproduct of PTSD, and you have PTSD, but you've been told you're clinically depressed or major depressive disorder. This happens a lot. It happened to me. I was diagnosed with depression. Well, I wasn't depressed. I was reacting to PTSD, and sometimes that shows as depression or manifests as depression. And yes, the techniques work for both. If you have a really empowered I am statement that comes from an internal place, you're not looking for positive affirmations or externally focused positive ideas to come into your head. You have it inside of you. It's coming off of you. You feel like I have value. I'm worthy. then that is the antidote to depression. Your identity and your values connecting in an empowered way will keep you from beating yourself up and spiraling into a mental depression where you feel like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart, I may as well lay in bed, I don't know what to do with myself because I feel all these things and they're so intense that I can't do anything. The counter to that is feeling empowered in your identity and your values, and all of these techniques and the treatment for PTSD that I use often for depression and anxiety because all of them are so connected. And in the medical field, we call that a comorbidity. But if you can find the index trauma, the root cause, the I am statement, and you can work through that and empower that and get rid of the other one that's attached, that's negative and false, then it can clean up these things, no matter which diagnosis it is.
Would you talk again, Ben? It was fascinating to me when the index event that you mentioned. Would you talk again about that? What define that? Maybe help people look for what their index event was.
Sure. If you go through your life and you detail, like we've talked about before, journaling or any of those things that kind of help you process this information, if you detail the things that have hurt you, it's a very difficult thing to do. It's not fun. But if you detail those and you use your whole brain now that you have information and experience and all of these things to work through that problem instead of working with your 5-year-old brain or your 12-year-old brain or your 16-year-old brain, you can come to an understanding and you can really work with the information in a different way. You can see different perspectives. You can understand that that person that was angry with me was angry, and it didn't mean I'm bad or I did something bad. The index trauma for EMDR is a target we use to process, and we'll go into that trauma. We'll see what the I am statement is behind it. We'll say, what are the thoughts that come in your head when you think about that kid that called you too skinny, when you're in elementary school, or that bully that was beating up on you, or that parent that was abusing you. All of these things, they're attached in there with these negative ideas of self. And we call that the index, the one that started this negative pathway that then over time is reinforced by other people, by other experiences. Now, this kid said that I was skinny when I was in elementary school. I call it Connor size now. We are the size we are, okay? And I'm okay with that and I'm good with it. But as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, you're supposed to be this muscle-bound guy and invincible if you're going to be a man. You got to be G.I. Joe. You got to be the Transformers. You got to be He-Man. All these representations in action movies like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all these things are perpetuating this idea that to be a man, you must be big and muscular and invincible. So one of my negative core beliefs was that I'm not enough, and related to the idea that I was small. And I fought against that my whole life. You're too small to play this. You're too small to do that. I can't beat Rex or Adam in basketball because I'm too short and I don't have long enough arms. Right?
That's not the reason.
Those ideas, they're also good.
That is not the reason.
Okay. But all of those ideas are reinforced from this index. If you can find the index trauma and understand it and process it, you alleviate all the pain and the attachment to that chain, that thought chain that has come from anything else that felt similar. And it's really important to dive in and find that so that you can understand that the trigger that you felt when you were fighting with your spouse was actually you fighting that index trauma and the feeling that you got then and the idea of yourself that has been reinforced from there. You're not actually fighting them at a 12 out of 10 on your volume scale. You're fighting whatever just happened that triggered the index and the feeling about myself that hurts so much.
Excellent. Let's address this since we've met Alice and talked about her coming on the podcast. Kathy McDowell asks, has Alice become a counselor or therapist in addition to your spouse and support line?
She's my therapist. She makes me feel good. She deals with my brain all the time.
Can we pay her to deal with us?
Yeah. She's not a licensed professional, but she's one of the most patient, forgiving, and compassionate people that I've ever met in the world. And she was able to use those qualities and her character to help me when I was traveling through something she couldn't understand, and take herself through it with compassion for herself, feeling like she wasn't enough for me or to solve my problem. That's a very negative tone that we take from a support or a loved one perspective. Was, why can't they solve this problem? Why can't I be enough? Why can't me loving them and me being connected to them and doing all the things I do, why isn't that enough for them to come out of this? And that's a very negative tone that starts to hurt you, but it's not the solution. You can't really be that solution because it's them versus them in their own head.
Mhm.
And I can win the chess match in my own head for either side of the board. I can beat one side all the way to 2 pieces, and I can turn the board around and I can win that game because I'm the one that's in my head doing that damage. And it has nothing to do with the person standing next to me. And she had to travel through all of those things. She's become very good at understanding. We do have our son that's neurodiverse and struggles through a lot of things. She's also been through that as a mom and as a wife. She's a single mom for 18 years. I was deployed that long. We had all 3 of our boys. She was pregnant with our 3rd son in Okinawa in our first duty station in the military. And when she was pregnant with him, the reenlistment paperwork came up for me, and there's this big bonus for pararescuemen to reenlist after your first enlistment of 6 years. And it was more money than I'd ever made, and it was tax-free because I'm in a war zone. And she said to me, do what you want. I'm going to Texas. And I got out, I tore up that paperwork, I came home. Yes, then I ended up contracting after a year of doing that, but we were in a much better place. But she was essentially saying, like, I can't do this single mom thing with 3 kids overseas while you're gone, and I don't know if you're coming home or not. And I don't know if the phone call that I missed while I was at the grocery store was you calling me on the sat phone and the last time I was going to speak to you. The email that everyone reads because I'm in special operations is muted. I can't talk about serious things. It's very surface level. Our conversations were listened to. She had to endure all of that from the perspective of, my family's not next to me. I have to really get involved with this group of people that are other team guys, wives that are here while they're gone, and we have to survive together. And it was such a tough thing.
Going back to that, was there any way that you guys communicate, like through code words? Did you guys, like, because obviously you can't really talk about things that you were going on with you, but did you and Alice have your own code words that you could mention that you understood?
We do now, and we have had for moments in public where I'm getting spun up and I need some help or I need to breathe or some space. We would come up with code words and do those things. But when I was downrange active duty, we didn't have that. When I became a contractor, there was a much more free communication. We could video chat and do all these other things that helped us connect more. But even that was difficult. I mean, this is an incredibly difficult thing to be raising the kids and doing life and all of those things while your spouse is ducking and dodging and not sure if he's going to come home. And she just learned a ton. She has grown through this, and we've grown through this together. And she obviously has done her own counseling, and she's heard what I've learned, and we traveled through that process while I was going to school. And so she knows a ton, but we didn't at the time, we didn't know any of these techniques. We didn't understand what we were dealing with. I mean, we were young kids. We've been married 24 and a half years, and we had our first kid a year after we were married, and we dove right into special operations, and we just didn't know all of this.
But now
class in the military.
But now, let's talk about now. So now that you've gone through therapy and you're a therapist, is there a time, like, say that you were over at Rex's house and you guys were there and I was there and there's people there and we're all playing games or something, and like in that movie 4 Christmases, you guys have a code word like mistletoe, like, we got to get out of here. Do you guys have those code words?
Absolutely. And she would, notice me and understand what is going on. Physical touch is incredibly important.
Yeah, just touch.
She might even under my sleeve, touch skin to skin.
Yeah.
So that I can feel that and connect to it and focus on what she's saying to me.
That's important.
It's incredibly important. If she calls to me from across the room and is like, hey, mistletoe, I'm going to be like, okay, yeah. And I'm still talking to Adam, right?
Yeah.
But we also have this thing about tire pressure. I'll babe, remind me about, I got to fill up that tire, or there was a low tire pressure warning. I just didn't want to forget about it or whatever. People use
Yeah.
whatever is convenient to them that doesn't alert everyone around them that like, hey, Ben is struggling right now.
Yeah.
And then there's all this drama and there's, this concern that we don't need to involve everyone in. We just
Yeah.
need to know that means I need to get up and walk outside, or
Yeah.
maybe I need to breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
Or maybe I
that's
just need
so
her
important.
to
I think
pick me
that's so important because it's, obviously you and Alice have that, but I'm sure there's other people that struggle, couples that struggle being out, like, in that kind of environment. How do you get through that? And like you said, touching, making that connection, mentioning a word so you can go outside and do some breathing and not make a big scene about it in front of everybody and stuff, trying to be normal, even though you're going through all these different things in your mind. I just think though this information is so valuable to so many people that are watching or listening to this. And Ben, it's just I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you having you on and picking your brain for free.
No kidding. No kidding. And more.
Oh, it's going to cost you guys.
It's going to cost us.
It's gonna
Okay.
cost us.
I'll give you a bite of this if you want it.
We will
Awesome.
pay because this is so, it's worth it, whatever the price is, especially for people that are going through and asking these questions. I mean, they're sincere questions.
Yeah. Yep.
We're going to continue this conversation, Ben. In fact, if you can hang on just a few minutes after we go off the air, we'll pass a couple other ideas by you with the same. Of course, we can talk later too, but there's just so much we can do here, so much that I think needs to be done. And I know our optimists agree, because there are still 20 questions that our moderators have starred that we don't have time to get to.
That's right. Ben will go back on the and answer them all in the comments one by one.
Well, we'll have to make arrangements to do this, because some of these you don't want to leave unanswered. So, or at least, we'll find some way to address them. But that's what this community is going to become. We want to be the resource. We want to help people that need help get answers. And Ben's, such an important part of this. Even if he says tomorrow, forget it, I'm out, then, he's the one that gave us the idea that this type of need is so vast out there. And so we hope we can do something about it. But more on that.
I love it. All this is good.
All right. So Tuesday, watch for that next podcast. There'll be an announcement that I think will be very exciting for our optimists. And then we'll follow up with a live next weekend, also probably next Saturday at the same time. We're trying to be consistent. So we'll try that. And this was the first time, again, we've had a podcast followed by that same guest on the podcast being here on the live. Let us know about that in the comments, what you think, even if you're listening to this after the live. If you didn't listen to it live and you're listening to the recording of it, let us know what you think about the immediate follow-up of this. Right away, we just think it's such a brilliant, not a brilliant idea, but a brilliant way to get more help for more people.
Yes.
But let us hear your comments on that. Adam, anything else before we take off?
Well, earlier we mentioned the merch store. I know Kimberly and Lindsay have done a great job with doing that. There's a new and improved merch store. I'm sure Kimberly has put some links into the stream, so check out the links if you want to get some merch. Make sure you do that as well. Other than that, I think everything, the way this Rex and I vision this podcast going now, I think we have a better, clear vision of how we can help other people with healing. And since Rex and I are not therapists, I think us being associated with therapists, I think we can be the door to open for a lot of people to get help. So just keep on watching the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. If you like in our book, if you want to read our book, feel free. We'd love for you to make a comment about the book or a review about the book. If you liked it, tell us what you liked about it. The audiobook's out. So we got a lot of stuff, and Rex and I are probably going to be doing a lot of interviews as Chad's trial starts, and then Lori's will be after that. So, we're just going to be busy for a while, and we like being busy because we Rex and I think heal from it. And one of the things that we do is talk, and I think the more that we talk, we heal. The more that we write, we heal. And we talked about writing and all that with Ben. So Ben, again, thanks again for coming on with us. Our optimists loved it. We'll definitely have you and Alice on again here soon. And then Jane has a special announcement that a lot of optimists are going to love. I think they're going to love coming up this Tuesday's podcast.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you again soon.